Hey folks, if you're applauding the recent burning of Nottoway Plantation in Louisiana, and who isn't, and what it represented, a fantasy of white luxury built on the brutalization of black people, and let us not forget the absolute erasure of their history, then let's be consistent. Let's talk about why places like Mount Vernon and Monticello and Montpelier and countless similar shrines get a pass. The places are fundamentally the same, aren't they? Forced labor camps, meticulously preserved to perpetuate a mythical past of glorious white history. Otherwise, why go? The standard defense? These are the homes of the founding fathers who supposedly created our nation. The difference is just branding between Nottoway and Mount Vernon. This is a terrible moral calculation. So it's implicit in everything that Mount Vernon or Monticello or Colonial Williamsburg or Montpelier, just go down the list, does. And the t-shirts with their logos that people wear without any sense of irony is this outrageous presumption that the lives of Washington and Jefferson, for example, are inherently more valuable than the countless enslaved people whose forced labor made every moment of their privileged lives possible. They mattered more. But the burning truth, they weren't the founders. They didn't matter like too many people think they do, on the right and on the left. They didn't create our country, the America that we actually live in, or the ones at least that we aspire to live in. It's not the one that they envisioned. They don't deserve the unending celebration, the countless documentaries, all of the goofballs who dress up like them for a living. And more importantly, not the deference that demands we segregate their history from the horrors that it was built on. So even at cites praised for acknowledging black history, which is a pathetically low bar when you consider how black history drove these places, you get at best a segregated slave life tour or a token exhibit, maybe even a web page and a few tradwife-style Instagram posts. No Whitney Plantations of these. We can count on one hand the number of places who do this the right way. These places. The rule to which Whitney Plantation is the exception is performative, curated to soften the brutality, a cozy, gauzy aesthetics, like living in a Ken Burns documentary. Cue sentimental music. Like Mount Vernon throwing in a reference to the beautiful uniforms of Washington's house servants to distract from the chains keeping them in position. By the way, that photo of the smiling man in his prison uniform, that's straight from Mount Vernon's Instagram. They want you to see this. Nice clothes, he's smiling. What's this picture really about? What story are they really telling there? And Monticello, which gets celebrated by all kinds of white people for doing it the right way, for being the gold standard. Let's take a look. If you show up today, it costs you a minimum of $42 for an adult to get in. That gets you the 30-minute highlights tour that covers the first floor of the house and Thomas Jefferson, the architecture, and slavery. It goes off every 15 minutes and is the main experience. You could also get a behind-the-scenes tour, $99. It goes off every 30 minutes and is an in-depth set of stories about Jefferson, his family, Monticello's enslaved residents. Really, they refer to enslaved people as residents, like they could break their lease and just go. But do you want a tour that actually centers the experience of the people whose home it really was, who made it, who paid for it? Better show up early. The From Slavery to Freedom tour, which used to be the Hemmings family tour, but the From Slavery to Freedom tour, much better spin that one, is once a day at 9:05 a.m. Get up early. That's it. That's what you got. But Monticello's new Founding Foes special tour about Jefferson's relationship with John Adams. It was specially created for the 250th anniversary about the Declaration, about two men who, I kid you not, created, according to Monticello, a democracy. This is going to be news to historians of that period. But Jane Kamensky, who now runs Monticello, is not a historian of that period, so she wouldn't know. But you can get that story 4 times a day. In the evening, you can get dinner for an extra $25. And they say to discuss civics. Maybe that whole democracy thing that they totally didn't do. And that dinner, which they call a feast of reason, inspired by the 18th century, would have been paid for, prepared, and served by just who? And Monticello supposedly does it well. And yes, these sites of generational black oppression happily host white weddings and parties, but some of them are more sanctimonious and sneaky about it than others, like Monticello. Check this out. This is what they say on their weddings page. As a site of conscience, we are committed to engaging our guests with a deeper understanding of Monticello's history as a plantation. Out of respect for the enslaved men, women, and children who lived and labored here, we do not allow private, non-educational events on the West Lawn, Mulberry Row, or elsewhere on the mountaintop. In Monticello speak, the mountaintop is where the main house is. However, there is more to Monticello than just the main house, just like there was more to Thomas Jefferson's plantation than just the home quarter. So if you still want your special Thomas Jefferson enslaver ambiance, you can get married at Mount Alto, the larger mountain right next to Monticello, where the library is and where I had an office, and which Jefferson, of course, owned. And enslaved men, women, and children labored. So it's very clear that Monticello's respect for those enslaved people has its limits. Monticello's response? Well, we know they worked there, but they didn't live there, so it's okay. It's a very strange concept of conscience. So why do these men in their homes deserve that consideration? All of the ethical pretzels that people insist on twisting themselves into to serve that vision. Because they founded America, right? But which America? Not the one you're probably thinking about. They founded what historians increasingly recognize as the First Republic, a failed ethnostate called the United States, established by the 1787 Constitution. It wasn't some noble experiment in liberty for all, no matter how many times John Meacham says it was. It was a project hijacked by a select few to centralize power, consolidate white dominance, and inextricably link political authority to chattel slavery, enshrining the definition of people as property into national law. It didn't have to happen that way. It could have gone another way, and a different version of the United States would have emerged. There was a United States before the Philadelphia Convention. There would have been a United States after the Philadelphia Convention. It was neither inevitable, nor was that Constitution essential. But it was pushed through with some stunning political efficiency on the part of James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. That First Republic explicitly denied citizenship to black people. They literally defined it only in racial terms. The 1790 Naturalization Act defined citizenship as only for free white people. That First Republic expanded slavery into new territories. Of course they would, having tied it to political power. They were the architects of Manifest Destiny and the Trail of Tears. That First Republic's Bill of Rights didn't apply to the states or protect liberty at all. But that First Republic was destroyed. It took the Civil War, a war fought to preserve that white supremacist ethnostate, to burn it down. The real founding of the country we inhabit today, our new birth of freedom, came with victory in that war and the ratification of the 14th Amendment in 1868 and the 15th in 1870. That was the realization of an American Revolution. Birthright citizenship for all, regardless of color. Neither Congress nor a president could have any say in that. No state could deny due process or equal protection under the law. The Bill of Rights applies to them too. The obscene 3/5 clause, gone. This was the birth of the Second Republic, the successor state to the first one. The moment the United States could finally begin to wake up from the nightmare that was the First Republic. The men of Mount Vernon and Monticello and Montpelier, their direct descendants and relatives and ideological heirs, fought to preserve the First Republic in the Civil War. George Washington himself was the literal symbol of the Confederacy. That is not a coincidence. Those founders would have disowned the nation envisioned by the 14th Amendment. So did the Second Republic immediately usher in some sort of wonderful vision of liberty for all? Of course not. This is America. It's still going to do its America thing. The heirs of the enslavers, the First Republic's loyalists, never stopped fighting. They won in courts, they won in Congress, and crucially, they won the story battle. Through books, films, monuments, textbooks, they wove lost cause narrative and then the patriot myth, these tapestries of lies for white people to cling to, twisting facts and erasing truths. That propaganda became what we in public history call heritage history, which is all about the heritage and nothing at all about the history. And that set the script of lies peddled about the founding fathers at their estates and gardens. These sites are not neutral historical grounds. They are active weapons in an ongoing narrative war. They spin disinformation on site and online on a daily basis, and they enable their far-right allies safe places to weave their own historical fantasies without being countered. And they all spin the lie that the First Republic was the loving parent of the nation that we became, not its enemy. They legitimize the idea that the words and intentions of those First Republic founders, men who would have abhorred modern America, should still dictate our lives. They enable the First Republic's contemporary heirs to insist on the relevance of an oppressive failed state. And they continue, for profit, to white people, to gain from the stolen labor and brutalized memory of black people. But the battle isn't over. Those who seek to restore that First Republic are hard at work today, every single day in real time, rebuilding brick by brick, and the historical narratives pushed by the current regime align with that, and they perpetuate that. They perpetuate the lies cemented at these sites. Just look at the 1776 Commission report and all of the new guidance now in place across the federal government that is drawn for it, and you will find more consistency with that vision at these places than you will find difference. They all insist that we still live in the First Republic. That's when America was great, after all. And its history should control our present and future. Step back into the past and then bring that past raging back into the present, effectively erasing the revolutionary vision of the Second Republic's founders. So when we think about the power of Nottoway's destruction, let's extend that critical gaze, shall we? Let's apply the Nottoway Effect to Mount Vernon, to Monticello, to Montpelier. It's time to metaphorically burn their legacy to the ground. Torch their lies, online and on site, on TikTok, on Instagram, and on tours, on YouTube and outside of their gates. Expose those who segregate or erase others in their storytelling. This isn't about rewriting history. It's about correcting it. It's about fighting for the memory and vision of the real founders, those of the Second Republic, people like Frederick Douglass, who gave us the framework for the nation that so many of you are still struggling for us to fully become. The fight against the First Republic's hateful memory is a fight for our future to destroy that hate. So to arm yourself for this fight and truly understand the stakes, ditch the textbooks that fed you the old lies and dive into the work of scholars who are excavating the truth. Read Nisha Sinha on the abolitionists and the revolutionary promise of the Second Republic. Let Martha Jones school you on birthright citizenship. Understand how the lost cause was manufactured and maintained with Karen Cox. Journey with Clint Smith as he reckons with the legacy of slavery literally etched into the American landscape. And for an unvarnished, unapologetically black perspective on our history, turn to Michael Harriot. Their words are matches. Light them up.